recording me wiping my nose.
Yes.
Get that on camera.
Ah, you go.
Oh dear. Hello, I'm feeling a little bit giddy. I think it's the new setup. I think it's how swish it looks on this. But thank you all very much for coming. So tonight's talk, Hidden History. Oh, can you not see it?
No, it's fine. It's got Dave's in.
Oh. God. There we go. Fabulous. You can all see it, yes?
Yeah.
Marvellous. More importantly, you can all see me, can't you? Good. So yes, hidden history, things you may or may not know about our wonderful town of Oldham. And basically what tonight's talk is, it's a bit of a mishmash. So over the 2 years, well, more than 2 years that I've been researching Oldham, but the 2 years I've been doing these talks, almost 2 years, you know, you come across something really interesting, but it doesn't quite fit in with the talk that you're writing, and then you put it to one side, but there's not enough on that one thing to do a talk just about that. And I realised I had quite a collection of like these orphan bits of information, and so I thought, why don't I put them all together? And if I call it Hidden History, it'll look like I planned this. Yeah, it'll look like I meant to do this all along. And it is, you know, it's just bits about Oldham, places, people, things that I've, like I said, just discovered in the course of doing research for other things or whatever, just seeing, because you wouldn't believe the things that I Google. And so yeah, I've brought them all together here. So yeah, it is about hopefully lesser known things to do with Oldham. Some you may know. Hopefully, I think I'm confident that there's things you don't. And I did consider putting in some things that sort of related to things like cotton mills and coal mines and some of the well-known businesses. But then I thought, I've done all that. I've talked about that. They're really well-known Oldham facts. So yeah. These lesser gems will hopefully, I know you'll let me know if they work as a talk on their own. But one thing I just want to mention that I came across again, I do Google, I don't do all my research from Google by the way, I use other things. But one thing I did find, so I looked at whether Oldham was mentioned in the Domesday Book, the book commissioned in 1086 by William the Conqueror, basically to see who owns what, where do they own it, how much is it worth, can I have some of that please? Because that was in 1086 and Oldham is known / believed to date to 865, so I thought there was a good chance Oldham may be in the Domesday Book, but there's not. There was no listing for Oldham, but to add insult to injury, the area where Oldham is and was is described in the Domesday Book as wasteland. Which I think seems really rude, but it really made me giggle when I read that. I was like, well, not only are we not mentioned, wasteland. So, anyway, without further ado, some of these may seem a bit weird, but stick with me. It'll all be worth it in the end. So the first thing I'm going to talk about tonight, it's probably not the sexiest way to open a talk, but I'm going to talk about these. And I can say, from very recent experience, I have a newfound appreciation for these. I don't like to talk about myself, ever. Yeah. But, you know, I climbed Ben Nevis recently, and after getting to the top, I was meant to make that clear, I had a bit of a tumble at the bottom, and I gave myself a nasty sort of sprain, and there was swelling and lots of squeaking, and I fainted with the sheer drama of it all. But no air ambulance, but lots of these were needed to get me through the resulting trauma. So tubular bandages, clearly very much in use in the 21st century, and I will be getting onto Oldham's contribution shortly. But first, let me take you back 10,000 years, okay? Because we think mostly these are a modern invention, but they actually have a very long history. There is evidence they were being used as far back as the Neolithic period, which takes us back to around 10,000 BC, a long time ago. So there are caves in Tassili, Sahara, that have paintings dating back to about 10,000 BC, depicting what are believed to be soldiers wearing some, oh this doesn't work on TVs, some kind of tubular bandage on the legs. And the Edwin Smith papyrus, that well-known papyrus, this dates to about 1600 BC, and it's the oldest known surgical treatise on trauma, and it describes 48 cases of injuries and wounds. And it provides evidence of compression therapy. For a lot of injuries, the treatment involved tight binding of that particular area. And interestingly, this treatise is unique in that amongst all the other medical texts from a similar era, it focuses solely on scientific approaches to medicine. There was not one reference to magic, which in most sort of prehistory treatises upon medicine, most of it's attributed to magic or religion, but this refers to neither. Okay, then we have Hippocrates. I think we've heard of him. A Greek philosopher and physician, lived around 460 to 370 BC. He wrote about treating leg ulcers with tight bandages in his Corpus Hippocraticum. We have Galen, another Greek physician, writer and philosopher. He wrote about using compression bandages to prevent blood pooling in legs. And we have Oribasius, another Greek writer and physician, not a philosopher. He lived, about 320 to 403 AD, and he treated leg ulcers with tight bandages. Roman soldiers, in fact, when I mentioned this, when I was doing my research, Marcus said, didn't Roman soldiers used to, use tight bandages? And they did. When they were doing long marches, they used compression bandages to stop any swelling or any other nasty side effects. So, potted history of the tubular bandage. Clearly a very well-known treatment spanning back thousands of years. So where does Oldham's contribution come in? Well, we have Mr. Ivor Stoller and his son Sir Norman Stoller to thank for that. Ivor founded Seton Healthcare in Oldham in 1952, and he invented the tubular grip that we know today. And Norman, his son, commercialised it, and really he is responsible for bringing this aid for injuries to the mass medical market. And he also founded the Stoller Charitable Trust in the 1980s, one of its focuses being healthcare research. So Seton Healthcare merged with a number of companies. It was acquired by a company called Reckitt in 2010, and Norman was knighted in the 2016 honours list for his philanthropy. So the tubular bandage may seem quite humble, but it has a very proud history, and its modern use is one of the things the world can thank Oldham for. You're welcome, world. Okay, and so on to our next gift from Oldham. You probably recognise this. Yeah, rag pudding, the humble rag pudding. And the creation of which is believed to date back to Oldham sometime in the 19th century. I have to admit, I'm not overly familiar. I've never eaten one, I'm really sorry. I'm sure it's delicious. I'm sure it's lovely. Very popular, made of minced meat and onions, wrapped in a suet pastry, and gets its name from being cooked in a cheesecloth, which is like a cotton material, very commonly used in cooking overall, particularly prominent in the cheese making process. And I think if you wore a dress in the 1970s, it had to be made of cheesecloth. I think that was actually the law in some countries. So people still do cooking cloth nowadays, but it was very common before ceramic utensils became widely available. So it's believed to have originated in Oldham in the 19th century, very popular still across the northwest, and probably created as a way of making a small amount of meat go a long way, common during times of economic hardship. And there's no specific dates as to when it kind of appeared. I can't find like the first written reference to it, but wondering maybe during the cotton famine, when the Civil War in America cutting off the supply of cotton to Oldham, maybe an economic necessity at that time. And when researching, I came across a claim online that actually it's not from Oldham. This claim online says there's an earlier reference to rag pudding from a line in a poem written in the 17th century. So I found that poem and I checked it out. So you're going to feel sorry for me. It's by Samuel Butler. He was a royalist during the English Civil War in the 17th century. And he wrote a poem, Hudibras. It was an epic. It took him 20 years to write it. Between 1660 and 60. It took me about 20 years to read the damn thing. And it's a satire about Republicans and Presbyterians during the English Civil War. Doesn't that sound fun? The things I read in the name of research. It is very lengthy, and I found absolutely no reference to rag pudding. So I stand by claims. This is an Oldham delicacy. You should all have it tomorrow night from the chippy. And while you're doing so, remember where fried chips came from. What would Saturday Friday night takeaways be without Oldham? Again, world. Okay. That poem was very boring. So don't feel you ever have to read it. Right, so Lawrence Chatterton. Who's heard of this fella? Oh, good. That's because Roy's not here. Having me straight up. He then told me even more than I know about him. So yes, Lawrence Chatterton. I told you this was hidden history. Okay, so I'm going to tell you why he's famous. When researching, I discovered an additional detail that I actually prefer to the real reason as to why he's remembered, and I'll come back to at the end of his section. So Lawrence, he was born in either Lees or Chatterton in 1536, and he was the son of a chap called Thomas Chatterton. And Lawrence was a firm Puritan at a time when this really mattered. And he is famous for being one of the 4 men selected as a translator of the King James Version of the Bible. So previously, most Bibles in England were written in either Hebrew, Greek, or Latin, not exactly accessible to your average member of the public. I mean, certainly not even now. I don't know how your Hebrew is, but my Greek is not very good. It was commissioned in 1604 and published in 1611. It wasn't the first translation into English. There had been previous translations. There was one between 1382 and 1384 by John Wycliffe, an English lay preacher and reformer. The first printed version in English was by a chap called William Tyndale in 1525. However, he only got as far as printing an English version of the New Testament, as alas, he was strangled and burned to death as a heretic before he could complete the Old Testament. He wasn't executed because of his translation. The authorities didn't like it, but he held Lutheran views, which they really didn't like because that challenged the established authority of the Catholic Church. So 1539 saw the first authorised version of the Bible translated into English. So King James, he wanted a new version in English because he'd inherited the throne at a time when there were lots of political tensions, religious tensions. He wanted to unify the church, and I think more importantly, he wanted to show that he was in charge. Okay, I can do this, so I'm going to do it. And previous translations weren't necessarily completely accurate, so he wanted to sort that out as well. And his was a big success, considered still to be one of the most important books in English culture. And I like this, so it helped introduce an awful lot of richness into the English language. There are many idioms that we use today that were first used in this translation, including an eye for an eye, a wolf in sheep's clothing, a voice in the wilderness, the powers that be, and salt of the earth. Became dominant English Bible for Protestants, still very popular. And so this is where Lawrence comes in. So he was the son of Thomas Chatterton. Thomas was a firm Catholic at a time when this really mattered. So he sent Lawrence off to study law at university, which is where he embraced Protestantism and Puritanism, made his religious views known to Dad, while at the same time asking for a continuance of financial assistance, thank you very much. And Dad said, no, a very firm no. So not only did he not fund any more of Lawrence's education, he completely disinherited him for his religious views. Didn't deter Lawrence from his religious beliefs or his studies, and he became a man of great standing and reputation, first master of Emmanuel College in Cambridge. And so he wrote a few, works on theology, but best remembered, or not remembered maybe, for being one of the translators for the King James Bible. But yeah, so the other thing that I found really interesting, he was born in 1536. Now, for a man born in the 16th century, what do you think the life expectancy was for someone at birth? 40? Mid-40s? Yeah? So, life expectancy at birth was between 33 and 40 years. If you survived to adulthood, it went up, you could potentially live into your 70s. Lawrence died when he was 104. And all accounts agree with this. Every single source I looked at to do with Lawrence Chatterton gave the same year of birth, year of death. He was 104 when he died.
It was the rag puddings that did that.
It was the rag puddings. I'm not reading that poem. It was the rag puddings what did it. Now, he doesn't have a blue plaque. And yes, we could petition Oldham Council to do one for his translation. I think here lived Lawrence Chatterton, 104 years old. I think that would be amazing. So, I'll see what I can get done. But yeah, so there's our man Lawrence. Next one. Fossilised forest. Ring any bells with anybody? No? So you're not aware that Oldham once provided valuable insight into the ecosystems of the Carboniferous era? I know.
Imagine a lot of places can do that, don't they? Dig deep enough and you can.
That's very true. Do you know what? And I'm going to come back to that. I will come back to that. So, in my talk about coal mines, I do kind of go on a bit about the Carboniferous era. Can anyone who has been at one of my coal mine talks remember how far back that is? I'll let you off. It was about coal mines. 300 to 350 million years ago. So a long time ago. But I bet rag pudding was around then as well. Yeah. And so this is something that Oldham has briefly contributed to the world of science, and I'd never heard of it. And there's a really good reason for that, which I'll come back to. So in 1878, a group of quarrymen were excavating shale to make bricks at Edge Lane Quarry in Oldham. And during the course of their work, they uncovered what turned out to be around 13 trunks from ancient plants. So they didn't quite know what to do with this, being quarrymen, but luckily, James Neild, a man who ran a local printing business, served on Oldham Council, and happily was also a geologist, got wind of this, and he became interested very quickly. So he identified the plants as Stigillari. It's not a term that brings much up when I researched it, so I think maybe he coined that term himself. But when he visited the site, he discovered the quarrymen had cut down about 11 of the trunks, there were only 2 still standing. So this is James Neild sitting down, some quarrymen going, all right, what's happening there then? So they're there. Sorry, because my pointer doesn't work on this. Over here, that's one of the trunks, and that's the other one. I think that might be quarrying equipment there, because most sources say there were only 2 standing when he went. So and the photo says he's sitting between the 2 trunks. But those are trunks from plants that are over 300 million years old. And I mean, it just absolutely blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. So he measured the remains, James. So the tallest standing trunk when he was there was 8 foot high, but the quarrymen said they'd taken a good 6 foot off it, before he'd arrived. And the widest trunk was reported to be about 2 foot in diameter. So basically what had been discovered was a really well preserved section of forest dating back hundreds of million years, when this area was a tropical wetland. And the trunks were all very closely packed together, just kind of showing how densely populated these ancient forests were. So there was huge interest in the discovery at the time. Oldham Chronicle got in on the action. An interesting discovery. Now, if I'd written it, there would have been far more superlatives in there. So it said about 12, around 2 foot in diameter. Once interest died down, we pretty much managed to lose most details, including where it was. By 1980, its location had been lost. Nobody knows where this ancient forest was. Nobody knows where that photo was taken. There's been a lot of research into it. The location has been debated for many years. So James described the location as Mr. George Milne's brickyard, situated near M. Mayle's colliery, Edge Lane Road, and he mentioned Mortimer Street. So this area is believed to be the area that the forest was located in. And so, considering no one knows where it was, not surprising that, you know, most people haven't actually heard of it, not aware it exists in the first place. And the trunks mostly disappeared. So once they'd been exposed, they started to deteriorate. So James had them removed to Bluecoat School, and they were placed in the Rectory Gardens. Apparently Manchester and Salford museums have some small samples in their collections, but the rest's just gone, sadly. And it's not known how many fossilised forests there are in the UK, but, you know, going back to what you said, I mean, there must be so many of them, but they're just really discovered by chance, such as, you know, the quarrying. There are 4 sites of renown though. So you've got a fossilised forest in Somerset. I really can't do accents. Somerset. This is the oldest. This dates back to the mid-Devonian period, about just shy of 400 million years ago. You've got the, I'm not going to do a Welsh accent, don't do a Welsh accent, Kelly. The Brimbo fossil forest in Wrexham. That's one of the trunks, dating back to 300 million years. You've got the Fossil Grove, don't do a Scottish accent. The Fossil Grove in Glasgow, dating back to about 310 million years. And then there was Craigleith Quarry. This dates back to about 330 million years ago. So again, one of the trunks. And it is frustrating, all those sites have been really well researched, they've been really well documented, and, you know, clearly ours wasn't.
So how have they survived then, once they're in the air or whatever?
So they'll have been treated.
They've been treated,
Yeah.
so
I mean, so this one, I think, is an original, this one, or it's the other way around, or it might be that they're replicas, but that you can treat them, yeah, to ensure that there's no further deterioration. I think it's like this thing that just basically makes them rock hard. Like, rock hard! Come on, mother! I love you, especially in Scotland. Love it. Yeah, so, I mean, they've been researched, they've been documented, and so the fossils in Somerset and Wrexham were found, you know, this century, so fair enough. But the 2 sites in Scotland were discovered in 1887 and 1826, you know, and ours was 1878, so it's a shame that our fossilised forest didn't get perhaps a bit more attention than it did. But maybe one day we'll find the site again. Maybe there's more to be uncovered, so we certainly hope so. And one last thing that I really like. So, you know the columns in Parliament Square that have the owls on top of them? Yeah? The design was inspired by the fossilised forests. I didn't know that. And we had friends from Sweden staying with us a few weeks ago, and we went into Oldham, and they were quite taken with these, particularly with the owls. So I was like, oh yeah, you know, the owls being the symbol of Oldham and rah, history, history, history. But I didn't know about the columns, because I did this research afterwards. But yeah, so they were inspired by the trees, or the plants from the fossilised forest. So now you know. Lovely. Right. Moving at a pace. Okay. Jeff Tootle. Rather dashing chap. But I like it when you say you don't know this, because it means it really is hidden history. I'm loving it. Okay. Bet you've all heard of Alan Turing. Well, don't worry, he's not included. He is not part of Oldham's hidden history. I'm not going to secretly surprise you that he was an Oldham lad.
He was excluded enough while he was alive. No.
No, that's actually very true. But he's not from Oldham. He's not from Oldham.
Yes.
So, you know, going to move on from that one. So, yes, our Jeff, do you know, just as important in the world of computing, but clearly his name is not so well known outside scientific circles nowadays. So Jeff was born in Chadderton in 1922 and died in 2017. He was an electrical engineer and computer scientist. He worked on airborne radar systems during the Second World War, and along with a couple of other guys, Freddie Williams and Tom Kilburn, he developed the Manchester Baby. Anyone familiar with that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool because it's great. Honestly, it really is. I'm not tech, but this absolutely blew my mind. So, as I said, I'm not tech. So basically what I've got here is in very simple words. So I don't go, what was that, when I'm reading it. So the Manchester Baby was the world's first electronic stored program computer. And I read that and immediately had to go, what was a stored program computer? So a stored program computer is a computer that stores program instructions, meaning it holds instructions for what to do for the task you're asking it to do in its memory. Yeah? Okay. And I read it described as like a recipe book. The computer follows the recipe, the instructions, to mix the ingredients, process the data. And that made sense to me. And this is important as it means the computer can execute different programs, switch between tasks without hardware having to be changed. So what this means for us is that when we're on our laptops, our computers, our smartphones, and we go between, I'm going to be on Facebook, then I'm going to go to internet banking, then I'm going to go onto Vinted to sell a pair of trousers, then I'm going to go and play Scrabble. We switch constantly, don't we, especially on our phones, playing games, looking at other apps and whatever. But it means we can immediately switch between them at a click of a button because all the instructions and data are stored already within the device that we're using. So, stored program computers, the Manchester Baby created the possibility for that today, which to a non-tech person, I just find amazing. So sadly, it's the Manchester Baby, it's not the Oldham Baby. It was built at the University of Manchester in 1948 and ran its first programme on the 21st of June that year, and it took 52 minutes to perform a mathematical computation that I read several times and still said, no, I don't quite get that. I recognised the words highest factor, but that was about the best I could get from it. But it is, I'm making a bit of light of it, but it was so interesting to read about. Once it had proved it worked, it was developed into the Manchester Mark I, which was then developed into the Ferranti Mark I. You remember I talked about Sebastian Ferranti at I think it was the first Blue Plaques talk. He was another engineering genius, but he'd actually died almost 20 years before the Manchester Baby. And the Ferranti Mark I was the world's first commercial all-purpose computer. But when I say commercial, you have to bear in mind, in the 1950s, it cost over £100,000, which is about £4 million today. So people weren't exactly rushing down to Curry's to put the name on a waiting list for one. You also have to bear in mind the size. So that's the original. This is a modern reconstruction.
It's kind of small, isn't it?
Well, could be. I would imagine it, yes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I just looked for a photo. It's not my photo. But yeah, you can see obviously it fills the whole room, and that's it kind of stacked side by side. But I mean, it's huge. It's not really going to fit in a 2 up, 2 down, is it? But yeah, so Alan Turing actually wrote the programming manual for the Ferranti Mark I. And Jeff worked on it before working for the European Space Research Organisation. He then moved on to the National Physics Laboratory, working on the European Informatics Network, which established technologies that we still use today. So Jeff's creation of the Manchester Baby is absolutely seen as the beginning of the computer industry. And next time you're on your phone or using your laptop or whatever you're doing, you are using the modern version of this creation. So that's the tech. I'm now going to go back a century to an Oldham painter you may or may not have heard of. And if you've heard of him, you may not be thinking of the same guy because there are several painters with the same name at the same time. William Stott. I mean, I think you've probably heard of Stotts. But William Stott. So he was one of the sons of Abraham Stott, the founder of Stott and Sons, the architectural practice founded in Oldham in 1846. I've not written the date here, that's good. Specialised in designing cotton mills. You know, Stott and Sons, they designed 191 buildings during the lifetime of the firm. 130 were either cotton mills or used in the cotton industry. All made him very rich, Abraham. He had 9 children, of which William was one. But unlike his brothers, he was arty, didn't follow in his father's footsteps and joined the family firm. Instead, he studied art in Oldham and Manchester, and then used Dad's cash to go to Paris for a length of time to study there. And he actually became very famous very quickly. He was highly regarded. He worked in oil and watercolour, known for his atmospheric paintings of landscapes. So this is one of his best known ones. It's called Le Passeur, the Ferryman. There is The Bathers. And this one I liked, Autumn. I mean, I think they're lovely, but very famous during his lifetime, but kind of, I guess, fell out of fashion or certainly became less well known. But in a review written in 1889 for the Scottish Art Review, the critic spoke about the spell that he cast, saying, "The secret charm of the picture consists in its witching harmony and restfulness, unbroken by any intrusive emotion brought into it by the human world." I'm no art critic, I just think they're pretty. But, you know, they are, I think they're lovely. Bit of goss about William. So he was a very close friend of the artist James Abbott McNeill Whistler, famous then, famous now, until William created this painting. This is Venus born of the sea foam. Whistler was very unhappy, as the naked lady was a lady called Maud Franklin, who was Whistler's mistress. And she had posed naked for him on several occasions, but Whistler was very unhappy about Maud being seen in the Altogether in public when the painting went on display, so their friendship terminated immediately. Of course, Maud's comments are not recorded. I bet she was chucked. So William was born in 1857, died suddenly at the age of 42 in 1900. Like I said, really famous during his lifetime, but works less well known now. Although I did find, you know, the highest price I could find recently for any of his paintings was 23,000. You know, so that's not too bad. And he signed his paintings, William Stott of Oldham, A, to show his pride in his Oldham roots, but also to distinguish himself. There was another Lancashire painter called William Stott, who actually went by his middle name, Edwards. As far as I can tell, no relation of this William Stott, so he wasn't an Oldham lad, but he was a contemporary. And our William, he was the most famous. Okay, so he got to go by William Stott. So the Rochdale William Stott went by his middle name of Edward, and he was popular in his lifetime, but again, his works fell out of fashion after his death. And there was a third William Stott painting at this time. William Robertson Smith Stott, hailed from Aberdeen, family connection there. He moved to London, was based there, and he died in 1939, was mainly like a book illustrator and portrait painter. But there you go, 3 artists at the same time called William Stott. I thought that was quite interesting, but ours was the most famous, and his were the prettier pictures. So there. Right, okay. Oldham Grammar School. This bit, I think this is my favourite bit of this evening's talk. A gentleman called Thomas Hunt lived in Oldham in the 16th and 17th centuries. He was the curate of Oldham and a renowned Puritan. You know, like I say, these things mattered at the time. He was a nonconformist. He viewed many of the Church of England's rituals, ceremonies and teachings a little bit too Catholic for his liking. Felt they didn't represent God in the proper manner, the proper Puritan manner. And so as a non-conforming curate, Thomas was quite often brought before an ecclesiastical court for not wearing surplice, refusing to kneel when taking communion. He got into a lot of trouble for that one. And made him unpopular with other Protestants, but Puritans loved him, absolutely loved him. He had a very godly reputation, and he started a school in his home in Oldham, and many families sent their sons to him for a sound religious education. Enter Lawrence Chatterton, okay, yeah, also fiercely Puritan, and he is described as being the driving force between the establishment of a proper grammar school in Oldham, and he was very involved with the endowment of Oldham Grammar School. And you also had a family prominent in the area. It's spelt Asherton. I don't know if it's maybe pronounced Ashton. That kind of makes more sense to me, but it's spelt Asherton. And they were a very prominent landowning family in Oldham at the time. And in 1606, James Asherton gave half an acre of land in what's now the town centre on Peter Street up towards Marketplace for a proper grammar school to be built. And Oldham Grammar School was built there in 1611. So X marks the spot. I've moved on from arrows. I thought, what else can I do here? So pretty much underneath Spindles, that's where Oldham Grammar School was. And it flourished as a centre of education in the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries, and Thomas Hunt was the first master of the school. However, due to the rapid expansion of Oldham in the Industrial Revolution, by the mid-19th century, the area around the school had changed from being a quiet, green, leafy, pleasant location to a slum. In 1865, a report stated it is placed in a filthy lane inhabited by the lowest Irish settlers, apologies to the Irish, and enclosed by a slaughterhouse. So no longer felt to maybe be the most suitable place for children to be sent to receive their education, and the school closed in 1866. Now it was only a small building. Luckily for us, it wasn't demolished until the 1920s, and there are photos of it, which I find fascinating. Okay. So remember, when it was built in 1611, it was just greenness, leafiness. How pleasant. The children probably skipped through the meadows on their way to school. By the time it closed, look, you can just see, it is literally like the town has just engulfed it, okay? But it's wonderful that these photos were taken before it was demolished. So you can see it was a single room unit. That's it, just from the other side. Yeah? No, it was a single room, 2 fireplaces. So it's just this really tiny building, single room, 2 fireplaces, originally an open space and just completely surrounded by the industry that's grown up around it. So although Oldham Grammar School was no more, it was reborn as Hume Grammar School. That opened in 1895 in a new location on Chamber Road. So you can see its kind of proximity, or otherwise. So the new school cost £18,000 to build, and the money came from the William Hume Trust in Manchester, an educational trust and charity established in 1691. And the same trust also created a grammar school in Manchester and Bury Grammar School. So, but then why did Oldham Grammar School get renamed? Because it was a condition of the money being given that the school had the name of Hume included in its title. Hence, Hume Grammar School in Oldham. After the original building was demolished, a doorway with a date stone and the initials J.A. for James Asherton. Just we'll go back. So that was the doorway there. So it was removed and it was incorporated into Hume Grammar School. So this doorway formed part of the fabric of the original grammar school, by deed dated 15th of May 1606. So it was sort of like, it was established in 1606, but the building wasn't actually finished until, built until 1611. Oh yeah, so this is the doorway in the original building. And then you've got a window from the original building, which was also relocated and incorporated in Hume School, Hume Grammar School. They've put like an Oldham city scene behind it. And then, so just, because someone said, oh, it's quite a small building, isn't it? So I went from that to that. That's what £18,000 got you in the 1890s, you know. But, you know, progress is progress, I suppose. And bearing in mind, population of Oldham in 1611, a few thousand, you know, population 1890s, right in the thick of the industrial, you know, revolution, well, you know, decades on from it. I mean, we were over 100,000, so, you know, clearly needs a bigger school. But I love that, and I just think when I found the photos of Oldham Grammar School, that they show, I think that's almost art, you know, showing the original building. I don't know if William Stott would agree with me, any of the three of them, but I think that was lovely. And so I'm going to finish tonight's talk, leaving you with another, maybe, forgotten about man from Oldham, John Robert Clines, known as JR. Was that a yes? Yeah. Okay. So I hadn't heard of him. So JR was born into poverty in Oldham in 1869, and he was proper right on. Okay, there was no messing with this guy. Born into poverty, he started working in a cotton mill at the age of 10, and when he was just 16, I mean, he was so appalled by the working conditions for children in the textile industry, he started writing about it. And there was at the time the Oldham Operative Cotton Spinners Union that was established in 1797 to represent cotton spinners, you know, to improve their working conditions, to increase their wages. But JR felt, well, this doesn't really represent the child workers. So children most commonly worked as piecers, fixing the broken threads on spinning machines. Very dangerous, because they usually didn't stop the machines when the children are darting underneath, you know, to fix the broken threads. And they were always suffering injuries. Annie Kenny, remember, lost a finger doing that job working in a cotton mill. So at the age of 16 or 17, he founded a new union, the Piecers Union, to highlight the harsh way children were treated. So, I mean, he was clearly very passionate about this. He received very little schooling, obviously, due to his poverty. He was self-taught. He saved money from his wages to buy books, including the Bible. He bought the works of Shakespeare, Francis Bacon, passionate about education as well as the rights of workers. And he became a member of the Labour Party, standing for election in 1906. He was elected to Parliament in 1906, he was elected to Parliament. He became the party's chairman in 1910. And eventually the Labour Party's leader in 1921. He was the sixth leader, the first to be English. I didn't know this, the 5 previous leaders had all been Scottish, and he was considered to be the first truly working class leader of the Labour Party. So he lost the leadership the following year when Ramsay MacDonald came back as leader for the second time, but he continued to serve. You know, he was Home Secretary, lost his Parliament seat in 1931, regained it in 1935, and served as an MP until 1945 when he retired. And so when he died, Clement Attlee in 1949, who was leader of the Labour Party, gave like a little, obituary about him in Parliament, which I thought was lovely. He said he started life with few advantages. He went to work at the age of 10 and was one of those who took part in organising of the less skilled and underpaid workers towards the end of the 19th century. He did a great work in the trade union movement. He was the youngest of those members of the Labour Party who entered the House in 1906. He formed the first Labour Party here and was the last survivor. So he was the last Labour MP from 1906 when it all got started. And I think, you know, rising from being a 10-year-old cotton mill worker to leading the Labour Party, not bad. So yeah, and a man who perhaps we don't necessarily remember his name now, but I thought definitely deserved to be remembered. So yes, those are the gems from my hidden history. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah.